I thought we would start with a story about a tree that's really meaningful to both of us. And I came across this story studying classical Chinese literature, and it's a story that's 2,000 years old in the Taoist tradition, and it kind of goes like this, where there's a woodcutter walking, and he comes across an open field with an enormous tree on it. And he gets really excited because he wants to cut it down so he can mill it into planks. And he goes up to it and gets ready, he raises his axe, and then he realizes, oh no, it's like this tree is not what it seemed to be. It's actually useless, right? It's too twisted to be used as planks for a house. It's too soft to be used for vessels because they'll rot. It's losing the sap, right? It's like, and he insults the tree. He's like, this is a garbage tree, right? And then the tree falls asleep, and the tree comes to him in a dream, which happens apparently in Taoist tree stories. And the tree scolds him and says who are you to call me a garbage tree, right? Don't you see that all those terrible insults you threw at me, that I was weak and soft and useless, that's the only reason why I'm surviving, right? And everybody else was cut down and milled into planks, but it's these things that are marginalized and insulted that are the basis for my resilience. And that's a really beautiful thing that struck me. And Jenny, you found the real life version of this tree in Oakland. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so at the very beginning of How to Do Nothing, I talk about this tree called Old Survivor, which is in the East Bay. I think we were just talking about this. I think I found out about it after reading that story, which I have to add, my favorite detail is that I think the tree also says, you are mortal and you will die. I'll still be here.
To call me
Yeah. He's you're an ant or whatever. But, so there used to be old growth redwoods in the East Bay, which is kind of hard to imagine now, and some of them are actually used by people in ships coming through the bay. They were navigation trees that were so big that you could use them to avoid a rock that a lot of ships were kind of foundering on. So one of those trees, they all got cut down. They all got logged, and except for one, and it was not logged because it was weird shape. It wasn't considered big. Now it would be, and it's kind of in a hard area to get to. It's kind of on an outcrop. You still can't visit it now. Which is a good thing. And so when I came across that story, I was like, oh, this is the real life useless tree. It survived because it was useless. And you can see it sort of saying those things to someone in a dream.
Exactly. And the thing I like about both Old Survivors and the story is this idea that uselessness can be proud and even defiant, right? The tree in the story is not tiny or shrinking. It's enormous, and it appears to people in dreams in an extremely confident way, and opens the door to this idea that we can move through the world in a useless way, but in a confidently useless way, which is kind of wandering, right? It's deciding to move through the world without a goal. And I know that walks and wandering are really meaningful to your practice, and I wonder if you could say that.
Yeah, and I also. When I was preparing for this, I was going through, I just moved out of the art studio that I wrote How to Do Nothing in, and I was having to pack up all the books. And so I found, I think I had a library copy of the complete works, but I did find this, it's a Thomas Merton, who's a monk, an American monk, wrote this book called The Way of Chuang-Tzu. And I don't think the useless tree story is in here, but as I was going through this and my notes from that time, I realized that how much this philosophy influenced the entire book. If you read the book itself, there's the useless tree story at the beginning, and you don't really hear about it again. But it's so I was looking at my notes from the complete works, which we both read, and Burton Watson, who was the translator, says, in Zhuangzi's view, the man who has freed himself from conventional standards of judgment can no longer be made to suffer. If anyone here has read How to Do Nothing, you're like, this is, he remains within society, but refrains from acting out of the motives that lead ordinary men to struggle for wealth, fame, success, or safety. And so it's just like interesting going back and being like, wow, this was like a deep influence. And then the other thing that I found, which I just wanted to read a bit of this, Thomas Merton's translation of a poem, that when I was reading it this morning, I was like, wow, this is an amazing description of these paintings that I just saw. So I'm not gonna read the whole thing, I'm just gonna read a little bit from the beginning and the end. Okay, so it's called Where is Tao? Master Teng Kuo asked Chuang, show me where the Tao is found. Zhuangzi replied, there is nowhere it is not to be found. The former insisted, show me at least some definite place where Tao is found. It is in the ant, said Chuang. Is it in some lesser being? It is in the weeds. Can you go further down the scale of things? It is in this piece of tile. Further, it is in this turd. At this, Teng Kuo had nothing more to say. But Chuang continued, none of your questions are to the point. They are like the questions of inspectors in the market, testing the weight of pigs by prodding them at their thinnest parts. Why look for Tao by going down the scale of being, as if that which we call least had less of Tao? Tao is great in all things, complete in all, universal in all, whole in all. And then, this bit at the end. When we speak of limits, we remain confined to limited things. The limit of the unlimited is called fullness. The limitlessness of the limited is called emptiness. Tao is the source of both, but it is itself neither fullness nor emptiness. Tao produces both renewal and decay, but it is neither renewal or decay. It causes being and non-being, but it is neither being nor non-being. Tao assembles and it destroys, but it is neither the totality nor the void. It's like, yeah, can we just go look at those paintings? Like, that's it.
I mean, I think that's really resonant to me, and what it points to is like, the paintings have this kind of like, everything everywhere all at once quality of like coming into being and fading back, and it's that kind of like openness that I want people to feel. And a lot of it comes from just like intentionally not having any kind of like focal point, right? There's like no one thing that demands your attention, and instead it's like 12 different perspectives kind of like moving around. And like, there's like little landmarks around the way, but like you get to decide whether they're important to you, right? Like I'm not gonna force you to look at a certain thing. And it's like really deeply connected to like Chinese intellectual history and like Chinese painting, where like in Chinese paintings, like meaning comes from like things in motion all the time, right? It's like you're flying through the clouds and you see the dark side of the mountain and the light side of the mountain, and then you like wash down this river, and then you end up in this quiet pond like next to a bird or something like that, right? And it's like so different from like the way Renaissance paintings are constructed, right? Where like Leonardo da Vinci is like, you will take one perspective lit by one light source, and you're gonna be frozen in this perfect moment forever and ever and ever. Which could be really amazing if that like moment is like the compassion of God forever. But he doesn't give you that choice, right? He's kind of like fixes you there.
Yeah, I was thinking about the part of How to Do Nothing where I was quoting David Hockney talking about Chinese painting. He gave this, I think it's on YouTube, but there's a lecture that he gives where I thought it was also interesting that in order to even depict these paintings, you have to do a tracking shot.
Right.
Like if you're not in front of the painting itself, where you can, and even that tracking shot's sort of inaccurate too, because that's not how someone would look at the painting. But he's, he has to show what it looks like, and he's, he hates Renaissance one-point perspective, like with the vengeance. And so, I think he took a lot of inspiration from that, but there's also a photo collage of his that I really love, where he was taking, like if he were to do a portrait of you right now, it's like he would take a bunch of pictures like this, and then sort of assemble them together, and it sort of has like a cubist quality to it. but there's one that he made of a plaque somewhere in a national park. That's a area that's been photographed like by a lot of people, and it's like including famous photographers. And so the plaque says "You make the picture," but like in this photo collage, it has this other meaning of like in any scene, like you make the picture by the things that you look at in the order that you look at. So like no one's visual path for your paintings are going to be the same.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that like creating the space for multiple perspectives and the freedom to like look where you please can be like an ethical question too. And I think that's something I noticed in your work where you observe about how like having multiple perspectives can be a path outside of like self-centeredness and like human-centeredness in opposition to nature too.
Yeah, and I think like there's there's an interesting balance between like creating a structure versus either structurelessness or like a different perspective where like you can like make a choice to sort of like pay a different kind of attention to something, but then once you cross over that, you're like completely out of control. Like you're like I'm gonna go there, like I'm gonna try to take the perspective of something else. And obviously there's a lot of stuff about birds and how to do nothing, but I still really value my encounters with just like neighborhood birds for that reason, because I find that I always I have the most meaningful bird encounters when I am like in an extremely like linear state of mind, or I'm stressed about something and it's like too goal oriented and I'm like maybe late. There's just like a lot, like I'm like kind of in like a tunnel, and then I just especially right now because it's warblers are migrating. It's like it like stops me in my tracks, but then also I completely like lose whatever perspective I was just in, and then I'm like in like tree world, but also like a migratory map. Like you have to think about really far flung places, and it's just like and it's instant, and then it kind of collapses back in on itself.
How does that sort of gear switching happen? Like, you know what?
Involuntarily. Because then that will make me even more late, usually.
Because there's definitely like an element of surprise, right? You have this plan of your thing you want to do, and then like something in the world happens to you, and it's like it's surprising. And you take time out to like acknowledge that, right?
Yeah, I guess maybe there's like a switch or like a lever at some point where you're like you either are or are not open to it.
Yeah.
Like the distraction is either like a disaster or a door. Or both, but yeah.
Right. And then I think about surprise a lot when I'm making these paintings, because like I was trying to like create the conditions where surprises could happen, like rather than like sketching something out. Because a lot of like amazing painters will make 100 sketches perfecting the gesture of the hand, and then be very, very step by step about it. But I've had to like kind of intentionally choose not to do that and just be much more spontaneous. Like I put the painting on the ground and I walk around it, making these like random dots, and eventually like after hours of that, it's this like texture of dots, right? It's essentially like a Rorschach test that I made for myself. And the rest of the painting is like figuring out what those dots mean to me. And like being surprised by the things I see, reinforcing them, and just like hoping the dots become the most like weird and genuine versions of themselves, based on what they show me.
It's like a conversation.
Exactly.
Like I think, like part of it is like being willing to be spoken to by the thing that is outside of you. In your case, like you made something outside of you.
Right.
And now it's like speaking back to you, and then you have something to say. And kind of
exactly. And I was like just surprised by how it's both like freeing and like less lonely. Like it's freeing because like it's not all on me to like meticulously design and make every decision, right? Like these dots have their own agency, right, and their own presence in this light, and like the fact that they're there too, doing their dot things, makes me feel like less lonely.
Yeah, like even just the word loneliness, like something that I talk about in Saving Time. There's I mean, in English it's translated to resonance, but there's a German, I guess, sociologist, theorist, I don't know how he would describe himself, but Hartmut Rosa writes about this thing called resonance, which is basically like the opposite of alienation. So like having resonance with one's environment or a thing is like basically the ability to be in conversation. Like, are you in like a dead world of objects that don't speak to you, or are you like one among many things that are speaking back and forth all the time? And it very much has to do with loneliness. Like he sort of, it's not in vogue to make like universalist statements right now, but he basically is just like, like resonance is a universal need across all cultures.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like some kind of connection with humans around you and the world around you.
Yeah, and including just, anything that's, even being able to like perceive anything outside of you is like having its own reality is like part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like takes us out. Well, it's connected to like attention and care too, and like realizing that there's things in the world that will like benefit for your care, but not from your like coercion or something like that. Yeah.
I am learning that very much right now because I am coming up on a year of volunteering at a native plant restoration thing in the East Bay, and I had never gardened before that, and I'd never weeded. I like showed up on day one and I didn't know how to weed.
There's a wrong way to weed.
There's so many, I can't think of what else. But it's like up by like the steam train kind of like in Tilden or near Tilden. And I'm also in a class that's a part of that project where we each were given like a little sliver of the hill that we're responsible for, which is also very stressful. But it's been a year, so I've seen like a year the whole cycle of the plants, and Californian plants have really strange schedules because of drought tolerance, basically. So our summers, this just blew my mind. Our summer is ecologically speaking like winter. It's like when everything goes to sleep. And then the new year is like October, because it starts raining again. Anyway, I can talk about that all day, but the plants are like, they do that, right? You're like, you do something and it's like, it liked that or it didn't like that or it did a weird thing, or like the number of ways that a single species of plant can grow, like, poison oak, to give one example, it's like, it could be a tree, it could be a shrub, it could be creeping on the ground, like.
But depending on the time of year.
Or depending on like everything. Like, soil conditions, water, is it like high in the mountains, is there a frost? Like, and so it's really like you really feel like the folly of that you could control any of this, but also that you would want to, because then you would be in that position of loneliness. You'd just be surrounded by like essentially like ornamental plants versus like
only the things that you wanted, right? Rather than the other surprising things that you didn't know you wanted that were meaningful to you.
Yeah, like the difference between that side up there and like, I don't know, like a garden that's like really just like regimented, and it's like I wanted the color red there,
I know that you're thinking about repair right now. I'm wondering if that's related to the garden, if this happened.
Yeah, it is. So I actually went it's really funny to think about this now. Last year I was like, I'm gonna go once, just for like reporting, I'm writing a book about repair. And then like, I got there, and one of the other volunteers is someone who worked at the dump when I was an artist in residence at the dump. And he was like, it's me, Gary, from the dump. And then later on, I was looking at my journal from that time, and apparently he said, how did you find out about this cult? And like, we make a lot of jokes about how it's a cult, but it's kind of a cult. Like, like after you go for enough hours, you get a hat. And I was like extremely excited about this hat. Anyway, so I originally went there for like book purposes, but now I'm just like part of the cult. So,
Keep going. Repairs was on my mind too, as I made like a particular painting upstairs where it's kind of like this fuzzy yellow and green painting. And I like fuzzy paintings with their focal points, obviously. But it didn't start out that way. That particular one started out as like the most like acidic yellow neon you could ever imagine, kind of like a safety vest. And I put like the darkest, shiniest marks on it. It looked like it like shattered the painting. And the rest of the process was just trying to like resist the urge to throw away, and then instead like work with what was there to repair it. And there's like a lot of trial and error, right? Like mixing up some thin white paint and starting to like soften it, and it looks like the clouds are coming in. But then I overdid it, and it was too cloudy. And then I like pick up the black paint again and make little trees, and then this forest starts to appear, but then it's too spiky and spooky, and so I need to like erase it, and then it gets like really kind of muddy, but like if you erase more, like the neon comes back again, right? And it looks like light through fabric. And so it's just sort of, by repairing, you invite the surprise, you have a different relationship with time, right? Because it's like the time is governed by the agency of the painting, right? And my own ability to realize what it needs. And it just kind of like unfurls from there. At the end, like it's just like surprising thing that still kind of like shocks me every time I look at it. Where it's like, oh, this thing that like sucks so much now has its own like identity. Like I helped it become what it was going to be.
Yeah, and I love that in your paintings you can kind of see that. I mean, there's no way that we would know that whole story, but the time is visible. And I was thinking about how, like, on the one hand, I wanted to compare it in my head to, like, you know, the restorations I've seen pictures of it from before, where it's like just all weeds and like one coyote brush or something, or lupin. And then it actually looks worse after that because you have to kill everything.
Oh, yeah.
And then you like, because everything's invasive, and then you like plant all this stuff. But if you go there now, you actually can't, there is no trace of how, like, it just looks different now. And so I think actually your paintings were making me think more about like geology, because like with geological sites, you can still see, like we went on a field trip in that class to this apparently very famous geological site, right? If you're coming down out of Tilden and you're getting back on 24 to go back to the East Bay, there's an area where you can see some gravels like abruptly change to volcanic. Like red, it's like gray and then red. It's like you can see it. You don't even have to get out of the car. But we were specifically told we have to go up and we have to touch it, which is very different. Like I've seen pictures of that site in geology books, but like when you go and you're like, no, like in some sense this is still here.
Yeah.
And so like I think there's something really interesting about like the trace.
Right.
Like that's still like the whole thing has become something maybe unrecognizable, but there is the trace.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the layers are really important. And there's like a really famous painter who had this like, who makes paintings with like hundreds of layers, right? And they're all covered up. And he has this great line where he's like, you wouldn't know that a certain layer was there, but you would know if it was not there. Right? And I was like, ooh, that's weird. But I think it's true. It's like, you can't define that those things are there, but you feel it, right? Like, I guess in geologic terms, you feel like your feet on the ground, and like the way you respond to the earth is different, even though you can't see the layer. And in painting, it's like, there's just like so much in the deep background, just that's vibrating and coming through in weird ways, and like gets excavated with more like care and attention, and it just becomes its sort of own thing.
Yeah, and I think the amount of time that you invested in, that's like also visible, it demands time. Like there's something else I quoted from David Hockney in How to Do Nothing, that he did it before he discovered the photo collage technique. He really hated photography. He had an extremely dismissive view of photography. He said it was like if you were a cyclops and like the world just froze or something, like it's just like one point. Yeah, but then so in that discussion, he says, like, I prefer painting because the amount, like, time can be invested into it, and a person, maybe not even, like, totally consciously can perceive that time, and then it asks you to stay there longer. And I think especially with your paintings, it's like, I mean, there's the pink one that I stood in front of, like, forever. I think I literally said, like, I could just trip out on this all day, is like what I said. Because it's like, there's no, like, because there's no one-point perspective, so you have to make, decisions, but also it's just like, the level of detail and the traces and like the amount of, like you just feel that as an object, this has had so much time invested into it.
It's really true. Yeah. And it's not time that, I mean, like, it's weird to think back on the creation of these and think of like the cycle and what I was feeling for each one. And I kind of think about like, when do I know when I'm done, right? And it usually has to do with like this like balancing moment when like no shape is competing for attention other than any shape. And I find myself like using brushes that are tinier. And the last one is always the Q-tip, right? It's like special Q-tip they use in nail salons that's actually like a point. And then the time it takes elapsing from one brush stroke to the next just sort of like gets longer and longer and longer, and then all of a sudden I kind of decide like, oh, this painting doesn't need me anymore, right? Like it can now stand in its detail and its weirdness, and I can like move on to another or
It's
something.
like telling you that it's done.
Yeah, it does, right? In its own sort of quiet way.
Yeah. I was wondering, this is sort of random, but when I was looking at them at your opening, I was wondering about the fact that they're portrait, like the ones that are, do you like think about portrait versus landscape orientation?
Oh, I mean, it was important for them to be like mostly the portrait for some reason. And I can't really, you know what, I think I know why. It has to do with like the movement of the eye. Like when something is a landscape, it's just sort of like maybe kind of on the nose. It's like, hi, I'm a landscape because I'm a landscape, right? Whereas if it's portrait, it's like, well, like we associate that with portraits and people, and so there's like more freedom in that kind of like non-landscape like envelope to like move the eye around in ways that are unexpected.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if it was something like that because it's like, I think as I was recalling the David Hockney like presentation with the long, you know, it's like landscape. You do, I mean, maybe, I don't know, I would read it left to right, but also you read it as a landscape, like where this is going to be the horizon, and, you know.
It's the horizon.
Yeah.
It's totally the horizon.
Yeah.
I don't like them.
Okay, I'm so glad you said that because there's a show, I don't know if it's still up at the Berkeley Art Museum, about, actually, that you would love. It's about like impermanence and sort of like pieces that deteriorate over time and how like the museum deals with that. But then also just pieces that they have that there's like a theme of impermanence like in the work. And there's a very old Chinese painting that's vertical called like wind and snow and the fir pines, which I also love because there's people in this painting, but they're not in the title. Like the subject is wind and snow.
Right.
But
people are like incidental.
Yeah, and so it's like it's very tall. It's big, like physically it's very tall, and you see like little tiny. It's like you have to look for them. There's little tiny people in a little tiny dwelling that looks so incidental, and then there's just mountains and firs going up, and there's little waterfalls at different points, and then there's no horizon.
Yeah.
Like it just keeps going up. And I remember, like, for a long time, I would feel, as a person who's obsessed with mountains, like extremely obsessed with mountains, and how hard they are to like depict in like both visually and in writing. I often feel like dissatisfied with Western paintings that are attempting to depict like the grandeur of Yosemite. Like there's like, it's a nice painting, but like that's not how I feel when I go to Yosemite. Like there's like something scary about mountains, and it's not like captured by these. So this painting, it captured it.
Right.
The fact that there was no horizon and it was just this wall of mountain in the background.
Yeah. Because I guess I'm thinking like the traditional Western mountain landscape is just like the sort of triangle in the middle of
They
the
captured the
horizontal.
mountain.
You put it in a box, right? But it's not in a box. It's like everywhere at the same time. Yeah.
I also feel like you might really appreciate, I can't remember if I told you about this, but I just wrote the afterword for a book about mountains, by a Scottish writer named Anne Shepherd, and it's kind of like a UK like nature writing classic. But she wrote it at the time in the 40s when a lot of writing about mountains was by male mountaineers, and it was like maybe the equivalent of the Yosemite painting. It was about like summiting the mountain, conquering the mountain. I'm sure there was some respect for the mountain, but yeah, it's about like a feat, and it's really about like the person. And her writing is like super weird and very poetic, and like the mountain remains a mystery. It's like one of the first sentences in the book is about how you can never know the mountain, you know. And so the book is not very long, but it has these amazing descriptions of like, which is, you know, they're reminding me of what you were saying earlier about like the shadowy side of the mountain, the way the whole mountain could disappear in 5 minutes because of fog. Like these like kind of apparitions and things like tricks played on the eye, and that you're just kind of there and you're participating. You're never ever gonna have a handle on it. Like you're the little guy in the painting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting to bring up like the little guys in paintings, and like the figure, because I don't put people in paintings, but the people are there in a weird way. Like for those of you who don't know, all the paintings kind of like revolve around this like poem by Patrick Holian, an excellent and brilliant poet based in San Francisco. And it's a love poem about two people who are really bad for each other, but then persist, right? And it's fiery and like really visceral, and he uses images that like I don't use, right? Like tongues, fingernails, the smell of smoke. And I found myself like reading this poem as I was making the work, especially when I got stuck. And I think I did it because it put a human presence into the painting, right? Even though it wasn't literally there, like it gave the painting this kind of like psychology, where it's like I could think about like grief and loss and the drama, and in a weird way, like helped me decide like what color to make things and like the way the land would fall. And I can't really describe how that worked, but like when I read the poem and like look at the paintings, I feel like a resonance kind of still.
Yeah, and in a way, like that also seems like a not lonely way to work.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. There were people there were dots, it was just like a party.
Yeah, and it's not like a self-contained thing where you're just like trying to, you know what I mean, like just make something from your mind. Like,
which I can't do, you know, like I've tried to paint that way, like just designing everything and doing the exercises, and it just never feels alive.
Yeah. It's not responding to anything.
Right.
Yeah. What happens when you? I'm curious what the painting looks like.
It's a painting of an egg. So when I started out like trying to learn how to make art, I took classes at this workshop that teaches you how to paint like a French person in 1850. And it's very regimented, right? Like you draw from plaster casts, right? You spend like 6 months painting like a vase of tulips or like an egg. And it's very meticulous and it's very tight and it's glowy and beautiful, but like at the end all you just have is an egg. Right?
Wait, we have to talk about your meandering career path, but I will say that reminds me of there's a collage artist who just went by Jess, who I'm also really obsessed with, who made, I had a physical like encounter with a 5-foot wide collage by this artist at the Cantor Center at Stanford that was kind of, I had a similar reaction to the like horizonless mountain thing, where I was like, this is a form of representation that I just been like looking for and I've been trying to make and I can't find it and I can't do it. But I did some research about him because I wrote an essay about his collages, and he was actually working on the Manhattan Project as a scientist. Then he had a dream, an apocalyptic dream, that the world was going to destroy itself in 1975. So he quit, and he took super basic painting lessons. And then he went to SFAI, dropped his last name, He married a poet, really famous poet, Robert. Okay, I can't remember his last name, but they were like this amazing artist-poet duo. But if you look at his work over time, it starts to Robert Duncan, thank you. It starts to the collages just the pieces get like smaller and smaller, and it becomes more and more like almost like one of your paintings, where it's like. And I remember that, like standing in front of it, and it was like I feel so. Like not overwhelmed. Like I feel like invited into this space, and like he'll leave you these little like trails of crumbs. Like there's an echo of this thing over here, and it's not like what people think of collage is like, well, like I could do that. You know, it's like so not that. But it's interesting that he kind of like went in a similar direction from the basic painting lesson.
Right, exactly. You know, it's definitely something to react against, which I definitely need.
Yeah. But can you talk about your meandering path, your path? I saw that on the outline. I was like, I want to hear that.
Oh yeah, I spent my 20s as a lawyer. I went to Stanford Law School for 3 years, took a lot of debt, and then was a lawyer at an international law firm for 4 years after that, and then discovered that it just like wasn't a fit, and then gave it up in kind of an abrupt fashion. And kind of felt bad about it, right? Like you spend 7 years of your 20s, that's really good time, on something that like didn't work out. And then spent like 10 years trying to learn how to make art in a way that felt like good. And did all sorts of things, right? There was like the classical painting, and then realizing that I don't want to paint tulips, right? And then there was, after that, I did like more conceptual painting, where I was making these Chinese landscape paintings out of ink, but instead of brushes, I was using like garbage from my compost bin, and like orange rinds and Kleenex and like things that are so gross I can't even talk about them in polite company. But like dipping them in ink and then drying it off and trying to like coax the most delicate sort of impressions out of it. And then I made this like law school conceptual piece where I like took all the documents from my like law school debt promissory note, like hundreds and hundreds of pages of pen correspondence and like the promissory note, and then like folded them into little mountains, and like so I have like hundreds of little mountains made of debt. But then none of it felt like really real, right, or true, and so I just sort of like came back to painting, right, and just have, I guess, it all kind of like integrates all of those ideas, the wandering, the surprise, and the layers, and I feel like that's a place now that I'm like kind of happy to wander around.
Yeah, I love it. I love where you arrived. But of course, like you're still
going.
Yeah.
Still going. Yeah. Do you think it's Q&A? Question time? Does anybody have anything they would like to know?
Your paintings in a certain way.
That's a great question. I think the landscapes, like they have to be. I think there's a lot of abstraction in there, right? Like if you squint your eyes, you wouldn't necessarily be able to know. But there's like little trees in there, or maybe like little leaves of bigger trees, and I think the reason why it's important that it's a landscape or that it could represent something is so that you have something to wander on, right? Like you're taking a walk, right? And the scale is changing, but like you're on the earth somewhere or in the sky. And that's why it can't be like a Rothko painting, because like who knows? But like there are trees, there are rocks, there's light.
It's like it's spatial. There's a geography.
There's geography and geology, yeah. That's right.
How's your question? Hi there. After you graduated with your art history major, you came home and I asked you, what is good art? And you said, whatever it is you like. I was wondering if that image of what is good art or bad art, has that changed in your mind?
That's such a hard and complicated question. I think art has to be good to someone. Like, it's a fundamentally a question about like human connection, right? Like, I'm making, that doesn't mean that all art has to have an audience, but like if I'm making art, even only if it's only for myself, it's like I'm connecting to me, I'm connecting to like history, I'm connecting to things that I've read. And so it's like evaluating on those terms. And I don't know, do you have an answer to that question?
Yeah, I honestly don't know anymore because I think there's something, obviously, I think like good art is like in the moment, like it was like a successful encounter, but that depends on, and some things are better set up for that, for sure. And I think like another maybe absolute thing you could say is like a certain level of care is invested into it, like that's usually helpful, but I don't know, I think about things like, you know, there's a book that is like basically like the inspiration for the book I'm writing right now. I bought it in 2016 at a used bookstore, and because I thought it was about something else. And then I started reading, I was like, this book's too hard for me, and it's not what I thought it was about. And then I was like mad, and I was kind of embarrassed that I bought it, and then I just like stowed it away somewhere, and then like, I don't know, 6 years went by and I read it, I was like, this is the most important thing I've ever read. So, you know, it's like, I think about that all the time with like, just like, who, like, there's a two-way encounter and they're both like moving targets.
Right.
Yeah, like not even the piece is staying in one place. So like, a successful art piece is the one that like bridged the gap
In that
moment.
that
Yeah.
instant, right?
Yeah.
And it might not happen again. It's kind of like how like a single piece of art, you view it several times over the course of my life. Like I have these like Chinese stories, right? Like I read them 20 years ago, I read them now, they're different. You know, it's kind of beautiful in that way.
As a viewer, I would say that I come away, like if I exit the gallery door, I come away with impressions of each of these works, but if I try to recall them, beyond the color of the work, sort of, I like can't remember anything in them. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on memory and wandering. You talk about your journal, like how does all of that relate in your mind?
Oh wow, that's really interesting. I guess it goes to the fact that they're like intentionally unfocused. And I think if we went on like a really long hike, right, we would see certain things and we would talk and we would have like a generalized like happy experience. And I don't know if we'd like be able to like record rock by rock what we saw, even if we were being really attentive about it, you know? I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny because I wrote, like, I think I just like wrote memory, like on my notes for this, because I was like, the paintings like have a memory. Like there's memory, the memory of the painting that you're looking at, right? Like the memory of your actions and like your reactions.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, of course, like I was earlier, I was like the pink one. And like, yeah, I can't, you know, but it does seem similar to just like experience. Like, I am someone who writes in a journal. The number of times, just the next day, I'm like, I had this great conversation. We had this great like 2-hour conversation, and all I remember is like this one really stupid joke. And it's not even the best joke. This literally happened like this morning. Like, it was like we talked about so many things and they were all related. It was like, you know, and I think like that used to cause me anxiety, and like I have to have a better system for remembering things. And then I think I started thinking about memory as something other than recall, like perfect recall, where it's like things just surface in ways that are not predictable, but when they're needed. Like no, I can't sit here and recount the entire conversation, but like 2 weeks from now, I'm gonna see something when I'm walking around, and it's gonna like connect to part of that memory that is still there and it's accessible. It's just not accessible like a computer.
It's an encounter
Yeah.
with a specific incident.
Yeah, and I'm subtly like one of these paintings, like I'm being changed all the time, like by these conversations, like in more like almost like a wash, but not like in this really identifiable way.
Particulars, yeah.